That same month, 1/3 of the people from whom the city had already purchased land appealed to Chittenden County Court for more money. However, the appeals process was a bit of a gamble. If the court ruled on a lesser value than what had already been paid, the difference would have to be paid back to the city.
The prices that were initially given to the people that owned their homes were for the most part extremely low, and many of the families were outraged and ended up going to court. But even going through the court process, it's my recollection that what they came out with was certainly far less than what the property which was valued at.
They said you weren't going to lose any money. They were going to relocate you at their cost. They were going to give you something comparable to what you had, and it was going to be no expense on you.
What we could pay and did pay for the homes were based on 2 professional appraisals done by members of the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers. The Planning Commission adopted a policy that they would pay the highest price that they could substantiate by an appraisal. We hired a review appraiser to recommend to the Commission what was fair market value. If the review appraiser felt that the appraisals were low, he would say so, and we would go back to the person with this information and try and adjust the appraisals.
In some of the instances where I was personally involved with, knew the people and knew what they received for their property, I think I felt that they were getting a pretty good deal. There was others that just did not want to be relocated. And when you're in your house for 40 or 50 years, what's proper compensation if you don't want to move, if you just don't want to be relocated?
In today's society, as we did it today, perhaps the courts would be looking at it in a vastly different area. But at that time, it was rubber stamped. It was a done deal.
The former residents of the project area weren't the only ones experiencing difficulties.
It was a federal office in New York City that didn't believe high-rise apartment complexes would go in Burlington, Vermont. That was their difficulty. We finally got the feds turned around, but it was almost too late for this firm to benefit from that.
We saw the Champlain Street project built on a platform at the level of Pine Street. That platform would create an area similar to, I won't say as equal to the space at St. Mark's and Venice. The entire community wasn't together on the project, and that there were different groups that wanted pieces of it, different pieces, segment the project, and that's what happened, is that it got segmented.
They were given 2 or 3 extensions of time to try and accomplish what they were trying to accomplish.
We're figuring, how did the city ever get anything out of this? Because here it was all dormant. There was nothing down there. The land was all empty. There was nothing being built.
It seemed to be expedient to the Planning Commission to default us, since we didn't meet what they considered to be, the kinds of having the kinds of collateral that they were looking for. And I think that they understood an awful lot of the problems that the developer Horizon was having in attracting companies to come in and settle in the renewal area.
Worked very hard to try and get the commitments that they needed at the federal level. Was able to, in the 11th hour, get a commitment, but it wasn't enough to bring that to a positive situation.
What could we do to show that this project, after tearing down all these houses, means something, that it is going to go ahead? So in one hand, they were looking for quick fixes. In other hands, another hand, they were hoping that we could get the long view. And Horizon didn't have the capacity to give them quick fixes. It just couldn't do it.
Despite the fact that the city had no developer under contract, demolition continued. Then, in December 1967, construction began on the first new building in the area, the Pearl Street State Office Building and Courthouse. Although no taxes could be derived from this structure, redevelopment had begun. 2 months later, the city signed a contract with a new developer from Atlanta, Georgia. Again, the project could move forward, 2 years after demolition began, except for one problem. One family still lived in the project area, and they refused to leave.
As you look down through that particular area and that vast expanse of nothing, after a long period of time, my best recollection was the Dutra Ponderosa still standing after everything else was gone. And it still stood for, I believe, maybe 2 or 3 years after the expanse was completely flattened of everything else.
As I say, I was the last one to leave because I wasn't about to take their word for whatever. They could call it anything they want, but they were all wrong.
She did not want to move. Oh, she fought them all the way. And I thought, this is a grand lady. I really did, because you'd see her on TV, or you'd hear about it on the radio, or the free press. She'd be splashed all over her pictures. And she'd defy them, and she'd stand there and tell them, this is my home, and you're not taking my... I'm going, boy, if we all got together, if the neighborhood got together, and if we did that, maybe we'd still be here today.
One night was on a Thursday. I looked up and there this big guy was standing in the doorway. And I said, yeah, what can I do for you? He said, well, I'm the troubleshooter for Art Hogan and Urban Renewal. And he said, you got to be out of here by Saturday. So I walked over to him and I had a big fork in my hand. It was frying pork chops. He backed off a little bit. And I looked at him and I said, look, mister, there's four doors in this house. You can take either one of them. I says, but I would take the one on your right. He said, are you throwing me out? I says, you got it. I says, and by the way, you tell Art Hogan, don't send a boy to do a man's job, okay?
If it weren't for the Dutras who said we have rights, nobody else would have awakened to that idea.
They were really hard fighters. They didn't want to leave, and they held out to the very end and really fought for what they believed. They were the last ones to go.
I was sneaky like they were. I moved out of that house. I left my blinds up. I left them half open, and I moved. And there was several days before they knew they moved when I was out of there.
By the end of May 1968, not even the Dutra Ponderosa was standing. It took 10 years, but the old neighborhood had finally fallen.
Did the city lose part of its historic character because this was demolition versus rehabilitation? Sure. But I think that the decision and the tools that were in the toolbox in the 1960s and late 50s are different than the tools in today's toolboxes.
The tools in the toolbox had in fact changed by 1982. Specifically, 2 blocks south of the Renewal area, the Battery Street Historic District was formed. Ironically, the buildings in this area were similar in style, age, and condition to those in the Renewal area. But instead of tearing these buildings down, the state offered a 25% tax credit to owners of income-producing properties who rehabilitated their buildings. This shift in city planning philosophy came 14 years too late for the residents of the Champlain Street Urban Renewal Project.
I can't take my children back and show them where I lived, where I grew up. That's a hurt.
For anybody who spends their childhood in a specific area, you always look back and hope to see it someday as you grow older, and that's not the case for myself and many others.
Well, I just look at it and think, geez, I used to live there and now it's the most valuable land in town.
This project helped to solidify this downtown. It taught a lot of us what was needed to make a downtown work. It has been an educational process for 2 or 3 generations now.
It took a long time to get to this point, and to measure 30 years from when it started, it wasn't a benefit to the city.
A lot of those homes that were destroyed could be landmarks. You know what I say? They paved Paradise and made it a parking lot.